Happy Monday, y'all.
Happy Monday. Can't believe the year is a third over already.
Yeah, it's really flying by.
Yeah.
Chair Long, the live stream has started, so whenever you're ready to begin, all of that is ready to go.
Thank you, Joyce. I think we're still waiting for a quorum. I've been trying to watch as people have gotten on, and I think we're still a couple shy of a quorum. So if you could help me count, but I've got 8 at this point.
We're up to 9, I believe, now.
I have Corbin's proxy, Commissioner Long.
Thank you, Mayor.
We should just make a rule that if people don't come within the first 5 minutes, we just grab the proxies and go move forward.
Hey, Mayor Morgan's got some special effects going with his camera there.
I
Yeah.
have no idea what's going on with this.
It's like a club.
Yeah, how did you
gonna
do
say,
that? How did you
I
do
hope no one
that?
is seizure prone because that'll do it.
I would like to thank the staff who provide this presentation to us in advance. You know, we didn't used to get that for ourselves, and I was taking pictures of it. All having this presentation materials has been wonderful, especially since the pandemic, since what I see on the screen share, I can't always quite read because it's kind of small. So thank you to all who are doing that for us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, I know we have a quorum. I will tell you who I see just to make sure. Ann Kitchen, Clara Beckett, Andy Brown, Marcy Cannon, Tucker Ferguson, Natasha Harper Madison, Jane Hewson, Rudy Matea, Terry Mitchell, Craig Morgan, who also has Corbin Van Arsdale's proxy. Anybody else on that I did not see?
Councilmember Ellis was just admitted to the meeting too.
Okay, Paige Ellis has joined us. All right. Well, we have a quorum, and then someone on staff, if you'll just note as other people come in and what time it was, I would appreciate it. Thank you. All right, so we will call the meeting of the CAMPO Policy Board to order. It is 2:03 on May the 10th, and we are still meeting virtually pursuant to the governor's emergency disaster declaration. And with that, we will move on to public comments. We have one, and I believe that is Zenobia Joseph. If somebody would allow Ms. Joseph in, Ms. Joseph, you will have 3 minutes. Have we got her? Has Ms. Joseph joined us?
Hi, Chair Long. We just admitted a call-in user 2, which could be Zenobia, and she has been requested to be unmuted.
All
Thank you,
right.
Madam Chair.
All right,
Thank you,
go ahead,
Madam-
Ms. Joseph. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. I'm Zenobia Joseph. My comments are specifically related to Federal Highway Administration funding. If you look on page 52 of the board packet, you'll see that approximately $4,158,388 are allocated from the Federal Highway Administration for the fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023. And specifically, I want to make my comments in the context of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, as I have in the past. And so I will call your attention once again to page 48, which has the ladders of opportunity, access to essential services. And I just want you to recognize the inequitable bus system that still exists in the city of Austin. Specifically as it relates to CAMPO, it says staff will research analytical methods to identify gaps in the connectivity of the transportation system and identify infrastructure and operational solutions that provide the public, especially the traditionally underserved populations, with adequate access to essential services. I could go on, but I just want you to recognize that in 2014, there was a Project Connect locally preferred alternative North Corridor study, which specified that there would be growth in the North Corridor, meaning Round Rock, Palmer Lane, FM 734. And specifically, there is no transportation because Project Connect actually eliminated the Metro Rapid on Palmer between Samsung and Apple, and there is no access to applied materials or the 3 HEBs. There's also no access to the hospital, St. David's North. And so while I recognize that this is something that you've heard me speak on many times before, I just want to call that to your attention because it's a discussion item later. It's UPWP, and I just wanted to ensure that you recognize that the inequitable bus system does not comply with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, specifically the Federal Transit Administration Circular 4702.1b, Chapter 4-16, which requires Capital Metro to reanalyze and implement the least discriminatory alternative. And so I just want you to understand that the pickup zone is not the least discriminatory alternative, and there will still be no access to Samsung or the 425-acre development East Village across the street. So individuals won't be able to go to work there, and they won't be able to do the construction jobs or live there once the development is complete. Those are my comments. I have comments later specifically related to Mr. Mitchell, and I will follow up with the Federal Transit Administration Title VI Coordinator, Mr. Kevin Ressler. If you have any questions, I'll gladly answer them at this time.
Chair Long, I think you might be muted still.
Thank you. I was enjoying that conversation with myself. That was all for public comments. We will move on to the regular meeting. There is nothing under item number 3. Item number 4, report from the Technical Advisory Committee Chair.
Chair Long, this is Chad McCowan. Our TAC Chair and Vice Chair are unavailable today, but I can give the report on TAC if that's okay with you.
That would be great, Chad. Thank you.
Okay, great. So a TAC meeting was conducted via WebEx on April 19th of 2021. We did have a quorum present, although there were no action items at this TAC meeting. Following the approval of the previous month's minutes, David Couch from Capital Metro presented on the Project Connect LPA and potential amendment to the TIP, which is the presentation that he is providing to the board today as well. Following this presentation, Teresa Hernandez of CAMPO presented on an information item on the 2022-2023 Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP. which will also be presented at the board meeting today. The following information item was a discussion of amendments to the TIP and the RTP, as well as an in-depth explanation for the amendment process and how the TIP and RTP are connected due to having several new members on the Technical Advisory Committee. And finally, we had an information item that had been previously requested by TAC members that we were following up on. This regards the review of Federal Registry notification concerning proposed changes to classification of urban areas. And this is something that Ashby will touch on in his executive director's report on planning activities during this meeting. That was, those are all the items we had at the TAC meeting.
Okay, thank you, Chad. Are there any questions of Chad? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to item number 5, which is a public hearing. And we will, at 2:10, we will recess from the regular meeting and open the public hearing. There is one individual that has signed up to speak, and that is Ms. Joseph. Ms. Joseph, are you still on board with us?
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. I'm Zenobia Joseph. I am referring to page 13 of 100 in your board packet. That specifically shows a chart that has the Capital Metro projects. The Expo Center Bus Rapid Transit is $2.4 million. And if you look further down on the chart, you will see Pleasant Valley Metro Rapid, and it shows $2.1 million. My opposition to this item is specifically related to comments I've made in the past, where there were 3 Metro Rapids for Northeast Austin that actually cost about $22 million less than those in Southwest Austin. And the only place that there was ever any reference to the projects were actually in the CAMPO board. And when I inquired previously, I was told that it was in the let year is not near enough. And so I just want to call your attention to the fact that while the Expo Center would serve African Americans, the service area does not end on Loyola Lane. And this is duplicative service. Route 337 operates 5 days a week frequently, and it goes to LBJ High School and then downtown. The Expo Center bus would do exactly the same. It's taxation without transportation for the individuals who live in Harris Branch, Pioneer Crossing, and once again, FM 734, which is Palmer Lane. And so I'm asking that $4.7 million be allocated for the Palmer Metro Rapid Bus, where you have about 55% minorities. It's about 70% on Dessau Road. And so while I certainly recognize that this will look like it complies with Title VI because it will serve African Americans, I want to call your attention to the 2017 and 2018 comments that are in the board packets for Travis County Commissioners Court, which specifies that it would still be a 1-mile walk. So the transit-dependent riders are not going to benefit from the Metro Rapid if they live in the far outskirts of the city limits. And so I just want to call your attention to that. I also recognize that Pleasant Valley will serve the Hispanics, but I want you to understand $9.9 million southeast-west connectivity exists in southeast Austin. And northeast-west, north of US 183, it's 24 to 30 years for there to be rail. And there's no one-seat rides anymore. And so I'm just asking that you recognize the need to make the system equitable, because the propaganda that went out for Project Connect said that this plan would serve everyone, and everyone's taxes went up, not just those individuals that live in the Colony Park area to downtown. And if you have any questions, I'll gladly answer them at this time. And thank you for allowing me to make my remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph.
You're welcome.
Just as a reminder, this is just a public hearing. There's not any action that will be taken on this. Ms. Joseph was the only person that signed up to speak at that public hearing. So at 2:13, we'll close the public hearing and go back into our regular meeting. That brings us to item number 6. Discuss.
Chair Long,
Yes.
if it's appropriate, I just have a question or two about what's being proposed for the TIP amendment.
Okay. And I am sorry, I was remiss. I think Ryan may have a presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So
Sorry,
I'll
Ryan, I jumped the gun there.
No, it's okay. So thank you. And yeah, so I'll just briefly go through a quick presentation to talk about the amendments that were submitted. Just to remind everyone, I know we have some new board members as well. And this is the spring amendment cycle. And this is a regularly scheduled opportunity that we have twice a year with which to make changes to the regional transportation plan, as well as the transportation improvement program. We've got the amendment cycle schedule down here below. And so the cutoff date for this spring amendment cycle was on the 16th of April. And then we took it as an information item to the Technical Advisory Committee on the 19th. And then all of May includes our community outreach. It's an opportunity for the public to comment on all of the amendments and the changes that were submitted. And we'll be presenting that information to the policy board next month. And we're also going back to the Technical Advisory Committee next Monday to ask for a recommendation to the policy board. And then we'll be back in June on the 14th to request adoption. And Joyce will go through at the end of this presentation just the ways that the public can comment on these proposed amendments. If you go to the next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, this is something we do on a regular basis. And the reason we do that is so that the most up-to-date information is approved by the policy board. Both the RTP and the TIP are basically living documents, and they need to reflect the most up-to-date information. And so we take this opportunity really every 6 months to take a look at what's in there and if there need to be any changes. Specifically, I would say the TIP is probably the one that changes the most, basically because these are projects that are being implemented over the next 4 years. And as projects gear up to go to construction or to be implemented, typically there are a lot of changes in the project development process. And so we need to reflect that. Specifically those projects that are federally funded, any projects that have funding through any FHWA program or Federal Transit Administration program have to be listed in the TIP in order for that federal funding to be released to the sponsors. And that's why it's important that we have these amendment cycles. We can also process amendments administratively. These are, I wouldn't say insignificant, but they don't rise to the level of significance as regular amendments do. They're more, I guess, administrative in nature, actually, and they can be signed off by Ashby, the executive director, and then just presented to the policy board. But anything that requires a significant change, that's either adding or removing a project from the plan or the TIP, or significant changes to the design, if federal funding amounts change, if the limits change, or if the schedule does, these are things that need to be brought to the policy board. That's either through a regular amendment cycle, or we can do a regular amendment through an out-of-cycle process with which we do everything all at once, where we do the public hearing and do request approval at a single board meeting. And the reason for that is if there's some kind of time limitation on a particular significant amendment. So if you'll go to the next slide, please, Emily. So I've got, I wanted to just break down the roadway projects that were submitted for the TIP amendments. And then also we have transit projects as well. So if you look at this slide, we have there are essentially two projects. We have the FM 621, which is one project that's kind of split into 4 CSJs. And it's going to be let in 2 different sections. And so they're shifting some funds from one section to the next. And modifying the limits so that they can let one piece that's ready to go today, this year, they'll let it this year, and then the second piece will be let later once they get the right of way taken care of. And then we also have RM 150, which is currently listed in the TIP. We're going to request to remove that from the individual listings, and we will add it to the appendices while it undergoes the environmental process and the NEPA process. If you go to the next slide, please. And then finally, for the roadway projects, we also have the City of Austin's Violet Crown Trail that was approved back in 2018. They're just making some minor modifications to the scope, going instead of a 12-foot trail, it's going to be a 10-foot trail. and they're reducing the project cost. And then we also have another project that was funded in 2018 along FM 2001 in the city of Buda. That's going to be let, they're requesting to change the let year from 2021 to 2022. And then finally, we have some amendments for the I-35 North and South projects that TxDOT is letting later, well, next fiscal year in 2022. And essentially, they're moving some funding from the northern portion to the southern portion. And that's because as they've refined the estimates, the northern portion has come in a little bit lower than anticipated, and the southern portion has come in a little bit higher. But if y'all recall, the policy board did approve this funding kind of blanketly for the north and south portion back in 2019. And so it's just really putting the funding on one CSJ versus another. So none of these projects are, none of these amendments are necessarily, major, I think, major changes, but they do need to be approved by the policy board. And there's also additional information. If you have the presentation pulled up, you see that additional amendment information is available in the online open house that Joyce will talk about, but that is directly linked in the presentation here. So you can go to that if you have any further questions about the amendments. And then finally, if you'll go to the next slide, Emily. And then finally, I wanted to talk about the transit projects. And so these are projects that are funded or anticipated to be funded through the Federal Transit Administration. We have 8 projects from Capital Metro. These are all locally funded projects at this point. And if you look at the phase, these are all the early phases of projects that were approved through Project Connect. So you'll see these, they're anticipating to submit these projects for federal funding from FTA, specifically the BRT route. And so when those projects do, if they do end up getting selected for funding through FTA, they will have to come back to the policy board for approval. So that's just an important distinction to make right now. The project costs you see in there are being funded totally through the local tax that was approved back in November. And then we also have the city of San Marcos. They got a grant to purchase 3 transit vehicles, and so they'll be doing that. And so we'll be adding all of these into the TIP. But I just do want to say that as Project Connect gets going, I think we'll be seeing a lot more pieces of transit projects. Normally in the past, we normally just see their regular programmed funding every 2 years when we develop the new TIP. We'll see a blanket, funding for 5307 and 5310, things like that. But as Project Connect gets going and goes after federal grants, those will have to come back to the policy board for approval. So I just wanted to point that out. And that is the conclusion of all the projects that were submitted for amendments. And then I'm going to pass it over to Joyce and just let her talk about the different ways in which you can comment on these proposed amendments. Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I ask Ryan a quick question before he does?
Sure.
Baton. Ryan, could you address Ms. Joseph's concern real quick? She made a comment about regarding the actual routes per se. I mean, I don't need a soliloquy, but just something real quick that regarding her comments.
Councilmember Matea, I think we may have somebody on from Capital Metro. I saw Sharmila Mukherjee's. Was she admitted to the WebEx, Emily?
Armilla has not called into the WebEx.
Okay.
But we do have Dave Couch.
Okay, we'll just ask Mr. Couch then.
Mr. Couch, if you wouldn't mind trying to address Councilmember Matea's question, it's probably more appropriate that you answer it than CAMPO. So if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you, Ms. Long. Thank you, Chair Long.
Did he hear us? Okay, I showed him logged on. Is he?
I see him on. I think he's just trying to get unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you,
Okay.
Dave. Go ahead.
The farmer line is the one that Ms. Joseph was referring to. That is one that is not in the initial system selection. The 3 that are in the initial selection are Pleasant Valley, Expo, and the extension of South Lamar to Mancheca and to Oak Hill.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for Ryan before he hands it over to Joyce? Okay, hearing.
I have a question, Chair Long.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Councilman.
Yeah, and you're talking about, okay, yeah, I have a question about the list. So I think that's what you're asking for right now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I have several questions, and I think that we may have a couple of other people that have questions too. So my first question is this is just something to note, and that relates to the transit projects. There's another project that I think is missing, and that relates to the BRT. I think Dave Couch just mentioned it. That's the Burnett Oak Hill Menchaca BRT. So I'm just flagging that for CAMPO staff. That requires some more conversation with Cap Metro, but I think that one may need to be added.
So this is Sharmila Mukherjee. Actually, there's a lot of echo in the background, so someone needs to mute their computer perhaps. But I'll go ahead. Board Member Kitchen, I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of give you a quick update. So South Menchaca, Oak Hill Extension, and Gold Line BRT are just the next set of projects that will be going forward with environmental review, 30% design drawings, as well as we expect that we would be able to wrap that in summer. So that's going to be in for the fall cycle amendment for TIP.
Okay, so my question for CAMPO staff is, what is the timeline for the fall cycle amendment for TIP?
We'll be opening that up in August, but I do want to say that they can submit the TIP amendments at any time. The application for it's online 24/7, but we'll be starting to process those in August. So I would look for the September, October board meetings as well, when you'll see the public hearing probably in September, with approval action in October.
Okay, that answers that question. The second question I have relates to, well, actually, from Austin, we had a question related to Colony Loop Drive and also related to a submission related to 3 of our bridge projects. I'm going to let Councilmember Natasha Harper Madison ask her questions first, if that's all right, Chair, about the Colony Loop Drive. Natasha, if you want to go ahead and ask, I know you had some questions.
I do. Thank you. I appreciate that. I just didn't hear the chair respond in the affirmative. I'm a rule follower.
Sorry, I was muted.
Thank you. Yes. So thank you, Councilmember Kitchen. I did notice that the Colony Loop is missing. And, you know, there's a lot of folks on the line who may not know this, but Colony Park is it's a part of Austin, a far east part of Austin that suffered from decades and decades of neglect and disinvestment. And, you know, now that the city is finally in the process of implementing the Colony Park Sustainable Community Initiative, and neighborhood's going to be completely transformed. And, you know, it will really create this regional anchor for residential, commercial, recreational, healthcare, transit related, you know, destination. And that Colony Loop Drive is key to the project moving forward. Even included in our Imagine Austin growth concept, that map identifies Colony Park as more or less the town center, you know, the job center. It's on the edge of the Austin city limits. And, you know, we are so close to Manor and Elgin and, you know, those outer parts of Travis County that are experiencing truly explosive growth. I mean, I could sort of go through all the transit part, the Metro Rapid Expo line, the Green Line commuter rail, the, you know, more successful that Green Line initial investment is, I honestly think the sooner, you know, we'll be able to expand that service out into Manor and Elgin. So I'm wondering, how did Colony Loop get left out of consideration here?
So if I could, I'm going to ask Ashby to just sort of clarify what projects or what threshold projects have to hit to make it to these lists. So Ashby, if you could address that, and probably the bridges question, just in terms of what's local responsibility versus regional.
Thank you, Chair Long. So, Councilmember Harper Madison, we did work with.
I'm sorry, Ashby, I can't hear you. Sorry.
I can hear him.
It was just very quiet.
Yeah, I can hear him.
Do I need to talk louder?
That's better.
Okay. So, Councilmember Harper Madison, we did work with City of Austin staff on the submittal for the project that you mentioned, and it didn't meet the criteria in terms of functional classification. That is a roadway classification that we have to go through for the Federal Highway Administration. And if the road doesn't meet the classification, it's not eligible for federal funds. And so we worked with, I can't remember her name, Warner, on that one quite a bit in the 2 weeks leading up to this item. And it's my understanding, and Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, the city was using local funds on that project. And the reason I'm bringing that up is you don't have to have it in the tip to use local funds. So it also didn't meet our test for regional significance. And we went through that with Warner as well. And we can send you the background information on that, council member, if that's helpful for you.
Sure, I'm happy to have it, but I'd also like to know, under what circumstances projects are eligible for reconsideration. This very much is an integral part of the continued development out in this area. There are substantial transit projects that will not happen without the completion of Colony Loop. So I see it as a critical component. So I'd like very much to not close the conversation at this is why we did it. I'd like to know, what are the options for having it be a point of consideration?
Well, if we could get more information that satisfies both the functional classification issue and the regional significant issue, then we can address that in a future amendment cycle. So the door's not closed.
Okay, I appreciate that. I guess I'm confused. I'm looking at how there's the TIP includes funding for the Metro Rapid Expo. I just don't, given that, without Colony Loop, we couldn't have the Metro Rapid Expo. It something seems incongruent is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, let me go back and look at that, council member, because those two that link was not provided to us when the city submitted the amendment. So let us go.
Is there something that I could do to help facilitate you getting the information you need? Could my office help maybe?
We'll reach out to you, council member.
Excellent, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then Chair Long, you were asking about the other projects, the bridges in particular.
Yes.
And Ryan, can you? Oh, okay. You're saying Zach? Okay.
Yes.
So,
hey there, Ashby. Yeah, so the projects that were bridge submittals were as a grouped project, and that was one of the projects that we had deemed were more operations and maintenance and less actual adding capacity. And so that was one of the reasons why we didn't include it into the amendments.
and then Councilmember Kitchen on the bridges as well. We went back to the board meeting, and I want to say it was 2019, where there was a significant amount of conversation among the board members about added capacity versus maintenance. And we sent that over to the city as well.
Chair, I don't know if you can see me. Can you see me? I have a follow-up question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so Ashby, that this is not an attempt to change the vote that was made last May. I'm trying to understand the classification of these bridges in the category that's not regional. I mean, the language. So let me just say this. I would like to ask that there be open conversation so we can continue to look at the application of the definition to these projects So for example, the two of them really impact the railroad, the UPRR railroad, and if one of these overpass, and that's the William Cannon and Slaughter one, if one of those overpasses failed, it would adversely impact the entire region's freight distribution and economic development abilities. So, and the other aspect of it is if one of these overpasses failed, it could adversely impact regional mobility. So I think that they are regionally significant. At least, and there's the one through Zilker is also regionally significant. So I would like more detail to understand what test you were applying to say that these were not regionally significant. So for me now, or do we need to take this? Do we need to just have a further conversation about it?
I am going to suggest that y'all take that. The comment period is open for a while.
Okay.
But just to clarify, if you will, and perhaps we need to get more specific, but we've delineated multiple times in the past what are considered local responsibility O&M kinds of projects, and everybody has them. Every local entity, whether it's city or county, has them to deal with. And there's, I can't count the number of rail crossings that go through Williamson County, but that are still considered local in nature. So I don't think we're going to solve that here. We can certainly reopen that discussion, but my fear is the billions of dollars that would be required if we start getting into local maintenance issues. We'd never fund a new project. But anyway, all that to say is I think staff has explained why those projects, in their opinion, didn't meet the bar. If City of Austin can provide additional information, but with regard to changing our policy, that would take further discussion and a vote of the board to do that.
Chair, I'm not asking to change our policy. I didn't suggest at all that we change our policy. I don't think we need to change our policy. And I believe and agree with you on that policy. I just think that in these instances, the policy has not been applied consistently in the way that, and there are, these are regionally significant, and I'm happy to take this offline and have further conversation and provide further information to Ashby and his team. I just felt it was important to flag it today. And again, no suggestion. I agree with your concerns about making sure that we're talking about regionally significant projects, and I believe that these are. So I will follow up with you, Ashby, on these items.
Thank you.
Chair.
Chair, I also just have a quick question.
I'm sorry, I can't see this. Tell me if you'll identify who it is speaking. Just say your name.
It's Councilmember Ellis.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, couldn't see it.
I can appreciate that. I know there's a lot of us on the screen. I did just want to jump in to say I would also like to understand better the regional significance, especially if a bridge might have a replacement situation or potential replacement needed. There are spaces in my district that, while they may be in city limits, they are used by many people who travel in and out of the city limits daily. And so I would like to understand with these bridges in particular, if replacement were a situation, it wouldn't necessarily be routine maintenance. So I would just like to understand that a little better if someone could provide that information offline to me.
All right, we will have staff do that, and at a future meeting, put together a presentation, particularly for the newer members, to better explain how we've historically defined regionally significant and the different functional classifications. All right. Any other questions before we hand it over to Joyce?
Councilmember Harper Madison has her hand up now. We got to put ourselves like Brady Bunch style, because otherwise it's really hard to see
it all.
Yeah, Emily, if you would change the view to, instead of speaker view, just showing the whole panel, please.
Yes, ma'am, I'll work on that.
And while she works on that, I can be quick. It's just more of a follow-up than anything else. Ashby, my concern is about timing. I want to know if you can tell me what are the implications of when we get that information back. What I don't want to have happen is that we miss any opportunities or jeopardize any other projects because of not getting the information to you in time for reconsideration around Colony Loop. So can you give me a good idea about what the timing should look like there?
So in terms
Deadlines, critical timing.
So in terms of this amendment cycle, the deadline has passed, but there's a fall amendment cycle coming. And as Ryan said earlier, the city could submit anytime in preparation for the fall amendment cycle that'll start in August of this year, and the board will take a vote in November. But in the interim, let's go ahead and visit and talk through the items that are of concern, and then see can we get things settled in time for the fall amendment cycle.
So, Chair,
Please, just identify who's speaking, please.
And real quick, just so I can make sure that I get, so this is Mayor Pro Tem Harper Madison again. I guess my question is still, the answer rather is not clear. When should we get information to you or expect to get information from you all? I just want to make sure we don't miss a deadline.
If you have the information now, go ahead and send it.
Okay.
Vice Chair Kitchen?
Chairs Ann. So Ashby, I didn't understand that last statement of the Colony Park and the bridge issues that we are raising are about projects that were submitted for this TIP period, not for the next one. And so we are talking about providing information to you to consider them for this time period, not for consideration for submission in the fall, because they've already been submitted. So I just want to make sure that was clear, and Councilmember Harper Madison was wanting to make sure that we got you the information in time for you to review that and us to have a conversation for you so that we can consider those for this tip period.
So let me ask Ryan, it's my understanding that those did not go out for public comments, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So when we had the due date was on the 16th for applications to be submitted, and then we spent the next couple of weeks working with the sponsors to try and get any information that was missing and make those determinations on what needed to be processed and what didn't. I think the important thing and the thing that was pushing, drives the deadline is really the public engagement period. Per our public participation plan, we have to take these out for public comment for 30 days. And so if we take something after, and that started at the beginning of the month. And so that's why we had those 2 weeks to work with sponsors on things. That included the city of Austin. And then we had some other TIP amendments that we just didn't get enough information in order to process those. And so we can still work with the sponsors and get that stuff in. But I think it'd be negating the public participation process to add stuff in this late into the public participation process. But like I said earlier, we can always do, sometimes we can do an administrative amendment depending on the type of request it is, but we always, we had the fall amendment cycle as well. And depending, if from run over call, all the ones that were not processed this cycle that were submitted were all locally funded projects. So unless there's some, from what I reviewed, I don't think there's any requirement that they be in the RTP or the TIP. So hopefully that wouldn't impact project development. And they can go in the fall amendment cycle, which will be in, I guess we'll be opening that up in three months, something like that. So just points to consider.
So Ryan, just to clarify, if or summarize, I think what I heard you say is if there's local funds on those projects, those entities can continue and should continue working on those. And if there's something else to be considered, that would be in the fall cycle.
Yes, ma'am. And that's the TIP, specifically the requirements are born out of the federal funding requirements from FTA and FHWA. So if you get federal funding through any of those programs, you have to be listed, but oftentimes, if it's a completely locally funded project, there's not a hard requirement It's really in there for public information purposes, specifically in the long range plan. And as those projects go through the development process, I mean, shouldn't hold up anything really. And then if they do happen to get federal funding, then we can, amend it at a later time. So hopefully that answered that.
Okay, Councilmember Kitchen, if this is relevant to this discussion or if it's one you need to take offline with staff.
I understand. I can close with this. I think I want to revisit this with staff, and we'll do so immediately. Our staff was only notified 1 week before the comment period that these projects were not going to be included. And what I was not aware that we were now foreclosed from including them. So I'd like to brainstorm with Ashby about how to bring these forward and not to wait till the fall cycle. So I'll be happy to take that offline. I don't think it's appropriate for our staff just to say that something's not going to be included and we're foreclosed from making that decision. So we'll have a conversation with Ashby offline and see what our options are.
To be clear, the staff was following the guidelines we've set. I don't know that they made arbitrary decisions. And that's, again, a policy that this board has set in terms of regionally significant, et cetera. And that's a bigger question to address.
Yes, Chair, I agree with you on that. It's just that, the application of our policy, sometimes there can be there's some discretion there in how you apply that. And that's all I'm talking about. I'm not talking about changing the policy.
Okay, noted. We will close discussion on that item and turn it over to Doyce for any more information that you have on the public input.
Thank you, Chair Long. Emily, if you can go back to the slides, please. So the public comment period opened last week on May 3rd. This is serving as the public hearing for the comment period. So there's an online open house with the project list and the maps of those project locations, along with project sponsor contact information. The project sponsors are going to be the best source of information for the public. So there is a contact listed in the online open house. There's also a link to submit comments. We will be doing 2 live presentations next week on May 19th and 20th that will be live streamed on the CAMPO website, and the comment period closes on June 3rd. Next slide, please. So we're still not having the traditional in-person open houses, but there's a variety of ways that the public can still share their thoughts and provide comments to the board. So as I mentioned, all of the material is available on campotexas.org for those that want to participate online. If you prefer not to participate online or would like to receive hard copies of the material, you can call 737-708-8144 and leave a message with your mailing address and name. We can mail that information to you. You can also leave comments by voicemail. And so this is not always something that is available, but right now, being that we're not having in-person meeting opportunities, you can definitely leave those comments by voicemail. If you've got questions or want to talk with with staff about any of the projects that are listed, you can leave a message there and we can return your call. You can send email comments in. You can also fax them or mail them into our office. And as I mentioned, this is we're not having any in-person opportunities, so there's a variety of ways that people can leave their comments this way. And just as a reminder, the public participation plan says that this is CAMPO's public involvement process. So in addition to this process, project sponsors are responsible for having their own public involvement meetings and process as well. So just a reminder that all of this will end, the comment period will end on June 3rd.
Anything else, Doyce?
No, ma'am, that's all.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate y'all's creativity and multiple platforms. Item number 6, discuss and take appropriate action on the meeting minutes from March the 8th. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you,
Will
Council.
second.
Okay, I got who was the second on that?
Houston will second.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. We have a motion and a second, and we'll go in the reverse order. Is there anybody against the motion? Okay, motion passes. And just to confirm, I still have Judge Oakley, Commissioner Shea, Commissioner Terrio, and Commissioner Trevilian absent.
Commissioner Shea is on.
I'm present, Commissioner Long. I have been for the last 10 minutes.
Okay, sorry. So you came on about 2:30 or 2:40. Okay.
No,
All right, thank you.
I think
Just after
Commissioner Trevilian
2:30.
I think Commissioner
And
Trevilian is
Commissioner,
on
I
as well.
have Commissioner Terrio's proxy.
Okay, so Commissioner Jones has Commissioner Terrios. All right, thank you. Okay.
I saw Commissioner Trevilian on the call.
We have him recorded.
Yeah, he's on here too.
Okay, great. Then Judge Oakley's the only one that is not accounted for, unless somebody has his proxy. Okay, all right, so motion passes unanimously. Item number 7, discuss and take appropriate action to authorize the CAMPO Executive Director to negotiate Regional Transportation Statistics and Metrics Dashboard Contract. Neerav. Go ahead, Neerav.
Sorry, I was on mute. I apologize.
That's all right.
Good afternoon. My name is Neerav Ved, CAMPO staff. If board members recall, for the last couple of meetings, staff has referred to creating an online dashboard that will provide data on our region's transportation network in a user-friendly platform. On February 5th, staff issued a request for proposals, which detailed the project scope and evaluation process. Next slide, please. 5 firms responded to the proposal, and staff evaluated Kimley Horn as the top-ranked firm. Kimley Horn's bid includes CDNP as a sub-consultant for community outreach efforts. Next slide, please. So these next 2 slides are mock-ups of what the dashboard could look like. Over the next few months, we will engage with the public, TAC, and the board before the platform goes live. This slide can show transit, for instance. We can see visualize progress in achieving our metrics, route performance, and analyze routes by individual stops. You can see things at multiple levels, such as a regional, county, or city scale. Next slide. And then finally, you could also look at specific roads by time of day, travel time, or direction. And we also have data such as crash data that we can visualize by crash location, time of day, crash factors. And just to reiterate, these past slides are all conceptual and just indicate what the dashboard could be. There is still engagement that needs to occur. And next slide. For this last slide, staff requests that the board authorize the CAMPO Executive Director to negotiate and execute a contract with the top-ranked consultant firm to develop the Regional Transportation Statistics and Metrics Dashboard. Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion for this item?
Madam Chair, may I ask Neerav a couple questions?
Sure. You want to put a motion on the floor first?
Yes, motion to approve item, what number is this?
It's number 7.
Number 7 as presented.
Is there a second? I'll second it.
Cannon.
All right, go ahead with your question, council member.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I forgot you're right, the right order. Neerav, first of all, give staff a lot of credit. This is phenomenal. This is the stuff. I do like how you added that addendum saying, dude, by the way, this is all conceptual. We'll see what we actually get. That's cool. I understand that. But you did mention that Kimley Horn said they're going to be working with, is it CDNP for public outreach?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so do they not have a public outreach portion to their staff, or is there something specific about this organization that's going to either help you address a certain portion of the public that necessarily you're trying to reach, or is there a certain mechanism or thing, or how does that play into that right there? I thought that was pretty interesting.
Neerav, I can answer that for
please.
Councilmember Mateo.
Yes.
So in this particular instance, council member, the Kimley Horn is a large firm, national in scope, and a lot of their outreach people are not in this market. So the firm that was put on as a sub-consultant is in this market and knows this market very well. So that's why they're out there.
Excellent. Good deal. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, any other questions on this particular item?
Chair,
Okay.
this is Ann Kitchen.
Okay.
Just a quick question that you mentioned. Thank you very much. I'm excited about this also. I think this is a great project. Just a quick question that you touched on, just wondered if you could give us some more detail. You talked about getting feedback from the public, I believe that you mentioned, and also the TAC. Can you just talk to us a little bit more about that? Here's my question. So does this dashboard come back to the policy board to approve? That's one question. And then if so, will we have the opportunity to hear public feedback or TAC feedback before it does? Does that make sense,
Nirav.
Ashby?
It does,
Yeah,
council member, and I'm going to let Nirav respond.
Yes, ma'am. So the way we, if you're asking, essentially all the answers to your question are yes. Whether it's specifically for approval, Ashby, I don't know. Maybe you could answer that part.
So, Councilmember Kitchen, in terms of both the board seeing items in advance and approving, so the contract is right now, if y'all approve it today, is set for, I think, 12 months. And so during the course, once we work up sort of the, I guess, the conceptual dashboard and we identify the data sources, we would bring that to the TAC. And we're going to be asking the TAC because they've got data sources that we need, that we don't have as individual agents, as CAMPO. And we'll be asking them also, Nirav and I had this conversation earlier last week, data management is going to be a huge issue on this contract because we're dealing with multiple agencies and multiple data sets that need to be maintained, and we need to know kind of what those are. But back to your question. So it'll be coming to the board as we hit major milestones, and we'll lay those out in the consultant contract. But you will see that, and you will see what public comment we get well before we ask you to approve it going live. It will not go live until you see it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Ashby. We'll move on to, I don't hear any other questions. We've got a motion from Councilmember Matea and a second from Mayor Pro Tem Cannon on item number 7. Is there anyone against item number 7? All right, we will note everybody as approving item number 7 and voting in the affirmative. We've got item number 8. We have one individual that has signed up to speak on item number 8, and that is Zenobia Joseph. Ms. Joseph, are you still with us?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, you have 3 minutes. Your time begins now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I'm Zenobia Joseph. My comments are specifically related to item 8, the reappointment of Terry Mitchell to Capital Metro's board. I opposed this item when it came before you on August 13, 2018. I stated then and will restate today. I first testified before Mr. Mitchell as it related to the Samsung area transportation needs on December 5th, 2016. At that time, he said he didn't have much information about the area, and I sent him a map as he requested. And so I want you to recognize that there's been a lack of transparency. I requested a cost-benefit analysis when they went through the Connections 2025 process, which then became CAP Remap when it was rebranded. and that was never transparently given to the board or the public. August 28th, 2018, on or about, RBJ senior citizens actually received a grant to get their bus, a second bus to their favorite HEB on 7th and Pleasant Valley, while those in Northeast Austin and Northwest Austin, specifically Merrilltown and District 7, Councilmember Poole's area, have to now walk 1 mile to the bus stop. It's approximately 1.3 to 4 miles in the area that's in Northeast Austin, and that's specifically in Travis County Commissioner's Court, December 2020 board packet. That's how far affordable housing is from transit. I just want you to understand that many of these decisions are financially related, and Mr. Mitchell has not been transparent. You heard me speak earlier about these Metro Rapid lines, and I went back to my notes, and specifically January 11, 2021, I got an email from Mr. Ashby as it related to Ashby Johnson as it related to the scoring matrix, and specifically that the CAMPO 2045 long-range plan had those 3 Metro Rapid lines that I referred to in Northeast Austin that totaled $18.4 million. Vernon and Oak Hill totaled $41.2 million. So I want to thank Councilmember Mateer for actually asking a follow-up question. I just want to tell you specifically as it related to the North Corridor, in 2014, it specified that 14 of the regional growth centers identified in CAMPO's long-range transportation plan are in the North Corridor, the most in any corridor studied in Project Connect. From 2005 to 2035, the region's population and employment are forecast to increase by 123% and 135% respectively. And lastly, almost 2/3 of the jobs, 2 most populated counties, will be located in this corridor by 2035 and will account for 58% of all jobs in this 5-county region. And so I just want you to recognize that Mr. Mitchell had an obligation to us, the citizens, to actually do cost-benefit analysis and to actually show us why those routes were selected before voters actually approved this plan November 3rd. And lastly, I'll just tell you, June 20th, 2017.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. We appreciate your comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you allowing me to make the comments.
Okay, Mr. Johnson, we have discussed and take appropriate action on the CAMPO appointment to the Capital Metro Board. Mr. Mitchell has apparently decided he loves this so much, he is willing to be reappointed. Is there a motion to reappoint Terry Mitchell?
Mayor Pro Tem Harper Madison, I'd like to make that motion.
Okay,
Chair, I'll second it, Commissioner Jones.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to reappoint Terry Mitchell to the board of Cap Metro. Is there anyone against that motion? Okay, then the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Terry. We'll vote you in 100% pay raise for that. Last time I checked on math, 100% times 0 is still 0.
Yes. Thank you.
And just a reminder to our new board members, CAMPO has 2 appointees to the Cap Metro board. Terry is one of those, and then Wade Cooper is the other one. So thank you all. All right, item number 9, discuss and take appropriate action on amendments to the policy board bylaws. Tim, are you going to take a stab at this one?
I will start it and then turn it over to the subcommittee. Board members, you may recall that you received an initial report from your bylaws subcommittee, which is council members Mateer and Kitchen, Judge Oakley and Commissioner Jones. You received their initial report on March 8th at your monthly meeting back then. At that time, there was general discussion on all these various changes that are in the red line bylaws that are in your packets. And at the conclusion of that discussion, the matter was then referred back to that subcommittee's for that subcommittee's review and consideration. And the subcommittee, in fact, did go ahead and meet and has now concluded its additional review and has added or changed a couple of items which are now incorporated, by and large, incorporated into the red line that is before you. In the March 8th meeting, the subcommittee originally recommended that a secretary position be created and added to the officers for the TPB. The subcommittee is now also recommending that that position not be filled immediately. It be created, not be filled immediately, but instead be filled at an initial election to be held at the next routine board meeting, which is in January 2022. That recommendation, I think, and I hope, will be included in a motion to approve these amendments. By the way, that reference is at page 58 of your packet, which is page 6 of the red line bylaws. At that same location, same pages, the subcommittee noted that it received written comments after the last meeting on March 8th concerning the status of TPB officers and the succession of the TPB chair. After review and discussion, the subcommittee is now recommending, and this is in the red line, number one, that all officers must be voting members of the TPB. Here, it's important for you all to, if you don't know this already, to recall that under our joint powers agreement is the document and agreement each of your jurisdictions have entered into with the governor, which are the basis for formation of CAMPO. In that document, CAMPO TPB is allowed to have both voting and non-voting board members. This amendment would require that officers be only voting members, and that the TPB chair, should he or she resign or no longer be eligible to be a voting member, the vice chair would serve as chair until the next election. Finally, moving over to page 63 of your packet, which is page 11 of the red line bylaws, the subcommittee reviewed and discussed the role of the TAC and the scope of its review functions after considering all the various comments that were made at the March 8th meeting. The subcommittee is now recommending that in addition to the listed items there, that all other technical items to be presented to the TPB also be presented to the TAC before recommendation. That's a summary of the additional items that the subcommittee added after the review from March 8th. And with that, I want to open it up to the subcommittee members for discussion and a possible motion.
Thank you, Tim. Just as a reminder, the subcommittee members were Council Member Matea, Commissioner Jones, Judge Oakley, and Council Member Kitchen. Rudy, you're in the middle of my screen. You have any comments on y'all's process?
I was going to ask you to let the illustrious vice chair, since she had her hand up.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see that. I just, in my grouping, you're in the middle. So go ahead, Ann.
So you're saying I'm Alex?
I think we were all on the same page. And in fact, we did 20 minutes, guys, I think. So, yeah, we thank you, Tim, for providing that information. I think that on the TAC language, we put in the word technical to try to reflect the conversation that we had with the last board members, with this last board meeting, which was basically that's the role of TAC is technical. And so that's why we used that language and just took out the other language that was concerning about what was in administrative, what wasn't, because that was just not the point. The point was that the TAC should be talking about technical items. And so that's why, we arrived at that language. And then other than that, I think there were some amendments that that Mayor Houston had recommended, and those are the ones that related to the voting members being officers, voting members of TPB and eligible to be officers, and we adopted the suggested language that she had provided to the committee. I think that covers what we talked about.
Okay, are there any questions about the subcommittee's report? Commissioner Jones or Rudy, do y'all have anything to add?
Just want to echo what the vice chair said. It went very, very smoothly, well, efficient. I mean, honestly, great sub. One of the best subcommittees I've been in years. So there we go.
Don't tell her that, or we're going to be doing it a lot more.
Oh wait, you're right. I said that publicly. Wait a minute. There's formal experience. Where's experience?
I just made note of that. Thank you. Okay, so what we'll be considering, should there be a motion and a second, is adopting the red line version that you see in the packet today. Is there a motion?
Commissioner, I'll make that motion with the addition of the secretary not being elected until the next regular elections for officers.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right, there's a motion by Commissioner Jones and a second by Councilmember Matea. Any other discussion? All right, is there anyone against the motion? All right, then the motion passes unanimously. Thank you all to the folks on the subcommittee, Tim and CAMPO staff that worked with them on that. I appreciate y'all taking the time to work on that. Okay, we will now move. That concludes our action items. I know we may be losing a couple of folks, so just for those doing presentations, understand if you're not done by 3:30, we're losing folks. So please take that into account in your quick presentations. And with that intro, I'm going to turn it over to you, Teresa, for item number 10.
Thank you. Good afternoon. This is Teresa Hernandez, CAMPO staff. If you could go to the next slide, please. CAMPO has drafted the fiscal year 2022 and 2023 Unified Planning Work Program, the UPWP, based on funding received from FHWA from fiscal year 2021. The UPWP is a federally required document identifying the planning priorities and activities to be carried out within the CAMPO region. CAMPO's UPWP is adopted every 2 years and may be amended if the planning programs change. UPWP identifies work tasks, which is comprised of 5 main tasks, including administration, data development and maintenance, short-range planning, metropolitan transportation planning, which is also known as the long-range plan, and special studies. Next slide, please. So the UPWP draft was taken to the TAC on April 19th, and we are presenting the draft today here at the TPB meeting. The final will be presented to the TAC on May 17th, and then it will be brought back to the policy board on June 14th. And with all this in mind, the final product will be due to TxDOT by August 15th. If there are any comments regarding any questions or anything in the UPWP, those comments can be sent to me to my email, teresa.hernandez@campotexas.org. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Teresa. I appreciate that. Does anyone have any questions of Teresa? Okay. Thank you, Teresa. Hearing none, we will move on to item number 11, which is an update from Cap Metro Project Connect Locally Preferred Alternative. And I think Dave, are you queued up for that one?
I need to get the share screen, unless you've got it keyed up.
Hi, Dave. We have it queued up.
Okay.
All right, go ahead, Dave. Thank you.
Okay. First, thank you very much for the opportunity this afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm Dave Couch. I'm the program officer of Project Connect, and I'm glad to be able to give you a presentation today on the status of Project Connect. Next slide, please. This is the sequence plan that we have had together and was approved last year and was really the basis of the sequence that went forward for the referendum. So this is our overall program schedule that includes everything that is the initial investment. Next slide. Going back to the funding, we have an overall program that is 7.1 billion. And with it, it includes a federal projection of some $3.19 billion. We're hopeful that it may be slightly above that. There's been a lot of conversation that it may change with the current administration, but that's something we're waiting to see. The system map is on the right-hand side. It matches up with each one of the components that are in the overall program. Next slide. We went through the early process, the alternatives analysis, and looked at each one of the corridors, went through a stepped process that included an evaluation of each one that resulted last June in the selection of locally preferred alternatives for the Metro Rapid lines and also for the orange and blue line. That takes us into the next step, which is going into the detailed environmental process under NEPA. Next slide. Specifically for the blue line, this line goes from the airport in across the lake into Republic Square. It is a light rail line that would provide tremendous capacity and dedicated transit ways that are there as a result of the actions by City Council for the ASMP. It will replace portions of our existing 20 route that provide service out to the airport. There are a total of 11 stations on the line and will run between 10 and 15-minute service. Next slide. The orange line is the north-south center spine. It basically goes ultimately from Peck Ridge to Slaughter. The portion that's in the initial investment is from the North Omar Transit Center to Stastny. Along that route, it will replace the 801 service. And as it goes forward as the locally preferred alternative, it has got 22 stations and a 10 to 15-minute frequency. Next slide. Specifically on the orange line, projected ridership of 54,000 to 74,000 a day. And as you look at each one of the demographics, the zero household cars, 8%, and individuals in the poverty in the station area, 23%. So as you start to look at each one of these, it shows what those specific benefits are. And all of these will be gone through in detail as we go through the NEPA process. Next slide. We went through and also looked at what we currently have as Metro Rapid service, BRT Light, if you will. There were a total of 7 different lines that we went through. And as we looked at it, what came into the locally preferred alternatives and included in the initial investment were Expo Center, Pleasant Valley, Burnett with the extension down to Mancheca and Oak Hill. And then during the process, we looked at, instead of doing the gold line as light rail, the initial service would start out as Metro Rapid. There are 3 other portions that are there that are beyond what is in the funding for the initial investment. and those are Crosstown, MLK, and Palmer. Next slide, please. We've gone through a very extensive community involvement process. As we went through to get to the point of the approval of the locally preferred alternatives last year, we had almost 70,000 individuals who participated. As we've gone through the scoping process for orange and blue, also the light rail lines, and looking at each one of those, we've now completed that part of the process, and we've got future meetings that are going on, and we'll be going out with the final alignments and potential locations for stations over the next few months. Next slide. As we've gone ahead and moved forward when progressing the program, we've started to do survey work to go ahead and establish what the right-of-way lines are. We continue to look at all the underground utilities to determine what may have to be relocated in order to facilitate the construction of the guideway. The pictorial to the lower right basically looks at what a section would be of the light rail track. It's approximately 28 feet wide and one track on each side. Next slide. As we've gone forward, we have held those scoping meetings, as I said, forward. We're getting comments from the public and also from our participating agencies. We're looking to start the research and define the historic resources, archaeological, and then continue to do field work for both resources and also the historic. Next slide. On Metro Rapid, the design is being finalized as we get to the 30% for Expo and Pleasant Valley. And then later this summer, we'll be getting to 30% and categorical exclusion for the Burnett extension down Manchaca and Oak Hill. On the red line, the design at the soccer stadium is under development. Broadmoor track design is basically being worked so it's got flexibility in operations. The Leander to Lakeland section of design for the additional second track is complete. And we continue to go forward with neighborhood circulators with the pickups guidelines currently under development in the final stages. Next slide. That concludes the presentation that I wanted to make today, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Dave, for that presentation. If it's CAMPO related, feel free to bring up the question, folks, but if it drills down into the weeds specific, you might want to check with Dave offline. Are there any questions? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Dave. We will move on to item number 12, Executive Director's Report. And Emily, you can take the slide down at this point.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm going to actually be using slides for some of this.
Oh, okay,
So,
sorry.
On quickly on item 12A, this relates to the change being proposed by the U.S. Census Bureau on definitions and designations for micropolitan and metropolitan. And we have looked at that information as CAMPO staff. We've also looked at that and had discussions with the Technical Advisory Committee on it. Our assessment as CAMPO staff is that it will not cause significant changes for us as the region. However, in conversations with some of my counterparts across the country who receive Community Development Block Grant CDBG funds, they are reporting that these changes in definitions could affect their funding. So if you as a local government are receiving CDBG funds from HUD, I would suggest you take a look at the Federal Register notice. And the material was provided in the board packet that was sent out 2 weeks ago. I would suggest you take a look at that. And if you think it's going to cause any problems, please submit comments to the Federal Register before the deadline later this month. And so next I will go over to item 12B and ask Nirav to walk through that report.
Thank you, Ashby. Good afternoon again. So we all know the pandemic made a significant impact on our transportation network last year, and this item will provide some data on that impact. For instance, this slide shows that crashes decreased almost 13%, while fatalities on those roads increased 11%. For the region, 2020 was the deadliest year on the region's roads. This is also the deadliest year for crashes involving speeding, bicycles, and pedestrians. For this slide, I would also want to note that crashes involving alcohol, speeding, and pedestrians comprise only about 15% of all crashes in the region, but about 60% of our fatalities. Next slide, please. With the previous slide showing a decline in crashes, this slide shows an increase in speed, particularly on our region's 5 most congested segments. The numbers next to the identification of the road shows the rank in congestion in our region. In one segment, you see that the average speed actually increased more than 40% for 2020 compared to 2019. Toll facilities also experienced actually a significant reduction in transactions, with TxDOT's facilities having a 27% reduction in transactions, and CTR-based facilities 14%, or actually slightly less than 15. Next slide.
So Nirav, before you leave that, just clarification for some folks that don't know, the TxDOT facilities in our area that are tolled are 130, a portion of Loop 1, and 45. Everything else is CTRMA.
Yes.
How is the speed calculated? Like,
oh, so there's a data set that we have been provided by TxDOT called INRIX, which is used nationwide, which essentially has, I believe it's a Bluetooth counter that they set up. They set up monitors pretty much on all the state's roadways, and they capture that data, and then that's how we get it.
it's sort of ironic to me that we've had so much, comments in the community about speeding during the pandemic, and it's like when people have fewer places to go, they're sure in a hurry.
Yes.
I have a very quick question too. I don't want to slow us down,
please.
but I should be brief.
Go ahead.
I would love if this information could be sent out to us with rush hour peak times separated from other times. Some of these speed limits don't necessarily seem on their face too concerning because some of them are close to the actual speed limit of the road. But I know sometimes we're gridlocked. Sometimes people are going way too fast over the speed limit. And I would love to be able to see that because I know a lot of the high speed situations have caused a lot of injury over the year. And so I would just love to see that broken down into peak times versus other times.
And we can send that to you. We should be able to pull that out of the data, Councilman Morales. And Nirav, are these average speeds?
So what these represent is average speeds on a Wednesday for the year, northbound.
Why Wednesday?
I had to basically, to make it less complicated for a visual, I had to pick a day, and it just seemed Wednesday would be the middle of the week where nobody really had an excuse not to travel.
Okay.
Because we love hump day.
Chair Long, I had a question as Councilmember Alter, if I might.
Go ahead, Councilmember.
Thank you. Is it also I don't know what the right measure is, but I know when we've looked at speeding on city streets, it's sort of like the 85th percentile of that speed, like what the speed is if you were at the 85th percentile. So that really shows you that top 15% and what speeds they're going. If we're getting, I just think that we really need to know the higher speeds and sort of that range there at the higher end to really understand the swings appropriately. This is all really important because we've had this increase in death and the speed, and as we try to think about solutions to achieve our safety goals, I think the more we can understand it, the better. Do we have any sense if there are any steps that TxDOT is able to take in response to these numbers?
We can ask TxDOT to address that at an upcoming meeting on that topic.
Thank you, that'd be great.
Or if they want to put together a memo to send out to the board, that would be welcome as well.
Even better.
Even better. Okay.
And the council member Alter's point, this is why I like median as opposed to average, just so you're trying to, get a better gist on these things. I mean, some of these things are pretty shocking, but what council member Ellis had to say too regarding, whether or not traffic time, what times you were taking care of would be interesting too. I think that a lot of people think just intuitively, they would think the opposite was occurring from a speeding standpoint, but obviously the results show otherwise. And I think it's interesting, Nirav, too, that you put the point out that this isn't from law enforcement or anything. This is from the markers that are put out there to track these things regarding people. So I guess when people don't think people are looking, they're even going to go even faster than they go before.
And Councilmember Mateo, to your point, when I talk to my counterparts across the country, they're all showing similar trends in their regions where the speeds went up considerably during the pandemic. If you look at the right end, the tail end of the bell curve on the right side, you saw a lot more people, driving 90, 100 miles an hour or over in some cases, and the fatalities went way up. And that was across the country, not just here.
All right, thank you, Nirav. Go ahead.
Next slide, please. So the previous slide, this is just showed the top 5 busiest segments, but they're all in Travis County. So this slide shows the busiest segment and the effect from change in 2019 to 2020 for the busiest segment in each county that is not in Travis. As you can see, the speed did increase, but not as dramatically as it did for Central Austin. And next slide, please. And this last slide shows non-SOV transportation modes, bicycle data. There's an asterisk there because that's because that data comes from the Strava app, and that app only provides a small sample size of bicycle usage in our region. It's not indicative of the overall bicycle usage, but it does show a huge increase in usage from 2019 to 2020. And that is my last slide. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Nirav. Appreciate it. And if you have more granular data, I think you noted the couple of members who asked for that. If you'll go ahead and get that out to them.
Commissioner Long, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see this done again next year because I don't know. I think that what you're seeing is, we saw it up here as well. Speeding, much higher rates of speed, more accidents. But now you're seeing the roads back to being full again. And so, I don't know if you really comparing 2020 to 2019 is probably not a good year to compare data to come up with solutions to, problems that I think were created by the pandemic. So it'd be interesting to see this again in a year.
Thank you, Mayor Morgan. We are going to be monitoring this and watching this over the next year for certain, and probably the next few years. We recognize that 2020 is an outlier year, and that is probably going to throw off the numbers in a bunch of different ways that we haven't anticipated yet, including census numbers. So we will be watching that and bringing something back to y'all.
All right, thank you, Nirav and Ashby.
Chairman Long, this is Commissioner Shea.
Okay, sorry, go ahead, Bridget.
Thank you. This is really interesting information, and I'm wondering if or how it may correlate to the really substantial increase we saw in telecommuting. I think obviously the increased speeds, the reduction in congestion, but I'm not sure if you actually measured or were able to measure the reduction in congestion. Is the increased speed sort of a proxy for that?
We don't know the answer yet, Commissioner Shea, but like you, we are interested in trying to see what is the correlation and the strength of that correlation between telework and the reductions in congestion that we saw on the roadway. We see that as central to the TDM program that we're kicking off, starting.
That's great. And not only did we reduce congestion on the road, our roadways, but at least on the 2222 project, they were able to complete it much more quickly because there was less traffic. There wasn't as much of a disruption to existing traffic by closing down, one lane in each direction to do all the utility relocation and all the disruptive stuff that goes along with road construction. So I know this has been a tool in our toolkit for a long time, but we've never seen this kind of a large scale application real time that we saw during the pandemic. And I've seen many transportation folks talk about this as a real opportunity for us to better understand the immediate power and effectiveness of telecommuting on a whole range of transportation related issues that are very costly, very time consuming, and frequently delayed because many regions don't have the money to do them. Thank you. That answers my question.
Thank you. Okay, Ashby, I think you have 12C.
Okay, next slide, please, Emily. So I was asked to give a brief update on federal transportation legislation that's going on, and I'm going to walk quickly through the American Rescue Plan, American Jobs Plan, and then transportation reauthorization on the federal side. Next slide, please. So the American Rescue Plan was signed into law, I believe, at the end of last year, and on the federal side, it provided $30 billion to public transportation operators across the country, and then another $350 billion to state and local governments. In terms of this body, it provided 15 million with an M, not a B, and that money we're going to come back and ask y'all to allocate in the next few months. Additionally, some of you as local governments are receiving money directly that can be used for transportation infrastructure purposes, is what I have been told when I checked in Washington, D.C. I'm following up on that. I had a conversation earlier today with Commissioner Terrio, and he was telling me that Caldwell County received $8 million as part of this act, and they were looking to see what they could do with that. And I told him I would go back and check with the folks I know in D.C. to reaffirm that the money can be used on transportation infrastructure. Next slide, please. This is the American Jobs Plan that was introduced by President Biden a few weeks ago, and it is proposing to provide $2.5 trillion to create transportation projects and jobs. And then the second bullet you see about the match, it is, well, let me back up. So first, it would be $611 billion total for the entire package. And you can see the different categories that would be eligible underneath the package: highway, roads, bridges, transit, passenger and freight rail service, safety, electrification of roadway infrastructure to provide for electric cars, airports, ports, lots of different things. What's unclear to us at this point is this 100% federal money, or would it require the 20% match that is normally required for federal funding? Why is that significant? That's significant because if you pump out $2.5 trillion worth of revenue on top of the regular reauthorization of federal transportation bill, that's a whole lot of money that we as the transportation community don't normally see at once. It would be difficult, in my opinion, for a lot of different states and in some cases local governments to come up with a match for that much money all at once. So that's what we're trying to find out, whether or not it's 100% money or is match, traditional match being contemplated. It's also unclear what the period of availability would be for the funding. So to give you a contrast on that, the regular federal transportation dollars come with what's called contract authority. And what contract authority is, it provides, so when the bill is passed, it's usually for a 5-year period or a 6-year period. And what this means on the federal side is Federal Highway Administration has contract authority, which means the appropriators don't have to go in every year and reappropriate that money. It's there for the life of the bill, and they have access to it, including the obligation authority. That is not typical of most federal agencies. They are having to wait on the appropriations process every year for their funding. So we're trying to figure out, would this money be just for a quick period, or would it last until the money is spent? Then the last bullet here talks about this funding that's being proposed, the $611 billion, would be on top of the 400 or so billion that's being proposed for federal reauthorization. Next slide, please. So this slide summarizes the Republican response to the American Jobs Plan bill that I just went over. So the Republican counter is $568 billion over 5 years, that this money would be in lieu of the federal transportation bill, not in addition to. The money would come through the existing distribution formulas to the states, to the local governments, metropolitan planning organizations. They would also look to encourage partnership with the private sector, expedite federal environmental reviews, and they would not raise taxes to come up with the money. It would be a pay for as you go through. One of the other points here is that the funding would be used to shore up the Highway Trust Fund. The Highway Trust Fund has been running negative numbers for several years. What's been happening is Congress has been doing emergency fund transfers into the Highway Trust Fund for several years. The Highway Trust Fund was estimated to go negative well before I left Federal Highways back in '03. And that came to pass with the emergency amounts that have been transferred into the account. We could have made the Highway Trust Fund whole by now and move forward. It is interesting to me that with the dollar amounts that we're talking about, that this is the first time somebody's talked about shoring up the trust fund. All users would pay in, including electric vehicles. And then it says they would also look to repurpose unused federal spending on the other acts that are out there where the money's not being spent right now. It would also preserve the Republican tax cuts that were made in 2017. And then it's inclusive of baseline spending. Next slide, please. So this is just a summary of what I just walked through there. You'll see roads and bridges at $299 billion, transit at $61 billion, rail $20 billion. And then broadband, I want to point that one out at $65 billion. I think broadband is critical for us. We found that out as part of the pandemic. whether we're talking about telework or we're talking about telemedicine or we're talking about children being able to access information for school. I think it is critical for us in this field, and I hope that that broadband in some form or fashion is funded at both state and federal levels. Next slide, please. So on surface transportation reauthorization, the bill was extended last year. It is set to run out again pretty soon. Right now, what's being discussed is Chairman DeFazio's bill that was passed last year. And that bill was a significant increase over what the current bill was. Right now, no way to pay for the increased spending has been identified. To get to the numbers that are listed in HR 2 right now will require another bailout of the Highway Trust Fund to do that, and about 13.6 billion to do that. So we're still waiting to hear what happens as we go forward. And let me go back a step or two to the American Jobs Plan. Right now, I am hearing that it is unlikely that that bill will pass. There's the margins in both the Senate and the House are very close, and I'm not sure the votes are there right now for that bill to pass, at least in the form that it stands today. However, if that bill does not pass, we still have reauthorization to go, and some of the ideas that are put forward as part of the infrastructure bill will probably come up again as part of reauthorization. So those are things that are worth looking at and worth us watching as we go forward. One of the trends I expect to see, whether it is in the American Jobs Plan or in reauthorization, is this trend towards discretionary grants at the federal level. Increasingly over time, what we're seeing is the creation of new federal discretionary grants. In general, that money comes off the top of the pot, and it's money that would normally go through the distribution formulas. Why do I bring that up? I bring that up because as a region that is growing rapidly, we tend, and those formulas being heavily predicated on population and population growth, we tend to get the short end of the stick when the formulas are not used. So I expect we're going to see more discretionary grant funds sort of put out there as ideas going forward. So we'll just have to wait and see. We're watching that. We are active as part of the Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations, which is a national organization. I'm on the board. Conversations with House Transportation and Infrastructure staff and Senate Environment and Public Works staff. Usually when things are going on like this, we talk at least every 2 months, sometimes more frequently. So we are watching that. If you've got more questions on this, I will try to get you more information. Stop there, Chair Long.
I have a question. This is Ann Howard of Ashby. Earlier in your presentation, when you were talking about the Census Bureau and the rural and urban changes, perhaps, I want to make sure I understand, the impact to the smaller communities in Travis County. Is there CAMPO staff that could help me sort of explore that with our county staff, or?
We can try, Commissioner Howard. Some of the impacts aren't things that we normally do, but we can certainly try.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ashby, for that report and for that update. Appreciate it. Going on to item number 13, announcements. The main announcement I have is that our June 14th meeting, we will be going back to in-person meetings. I think most of our member entities are already doing that. And Ashby, do you want to provide a few of the details as to location and some of the things that you all have researched and done?
Thanks, Chair Long, and I'll talk briefly and then ask Joyce to jump in. So we have been looking at switching over to the junior league facility over off 360 for a while. Even before the pandemic, we were looking at that facility. It is much larger than the facility that we had at UT. It is much more modern. It's got a much better sound system.
Yay.
And it's got much better parking as well. So the parking was always an issue for us at UT and restricted us from being able to meet when we needed to be able to meet sometimes. And so this clears up a lot of that for us. They've got a facility, a ballroom there that can be made smaller into 3 ballrooms or 1 big ballroom, which is what we've been looking at. So we've gone out to the facility recently with our sound guy, had him put the soundboard in and test everything. We've looked at different entrances into the building. We feel that we can easily social distance the members at that facility and the public at that facility and still probably have space left over. So I'm going to stop and ask Joyce to jump in.
I think Ashby covered it. It does have a little bit better updated audio system, so I think that everyone in the in the meeting will be able to hear a little bit better. It's a large space, and so originally we were looking at using the largest ballroom, but to accommodate social distancing, we'll be able to use all 3 of the rooms that open up into one large one. There's multiple entrances for people to be able to come in and exit the room and still provide space for people. As Ashby mentioned, there is a large parking garage that is connected to the building. And we are looking at accommodations for those that are not able to drive, that want to or need to take the bus or transit to the meetings. There is a bus line that's on the other side of 360 from there, and then a larger bus line down Anderson Lane. So we're looking at accommodations to be able to get people from those transit facilities over to the Community Impact Center. So the Community Impact Center is at 360 and Bluffstone. Many people know that kind of split off of 360 where Spicewood Springs is. So it's at the bottom of the hill on Spicewood Springs at 360 on the west side. So I think Ashby covered most of it. If y'all have any questions about the facility or anything, we're happy to answer those.
I have a question, Councilmember Ellis. Are we going to continue to do 2 p.m. or 6 p.m.? And I'm sorry if you covered this and I just missed it.
No, I think we had several discussions on that, and we are going to stick with 2 p.m. That allows us to try not to be in the PM commute and not add to the vehicles on the road at the peak time.
Thanks.
Councilmember Kitchen.
Yeah, so we can talk about this offline. I'd just like to understand what we can do to help accommodate people who may want to be speaking to us. So it sounds good. I'm glad to hear that some efforts made to help people get from that bus stop. But I'm also wondering, have we explored the possibility of continuing to allow some call-in as well as in person for people? It just strikes me that it may be more difficult for people to get to this location, especially at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So
Vice Chair Kitchen, I remember Mayor Morgan bringing that same thing up a year ago, saying, "Yeah, let's keep that option for." I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Chair, but I think that's one of the options that's probably going to stay at post-pandemic in general, with people being able to remote in for some of these things. I think that's a change.
I think staff is going to look at what our options are and what we can look at. I would ask that y'all be patient with, as we transition back. We'll make sure we meet the Open Meetings Act, and we're going to do the best we can. But with a new facility and all, and having to set it up a little differently, just be patient. Staff will work extra hard to make sure everybody gets notice of where we're going to be and how that's going to work. So, and I think the next I'm sorry, was there another question?
Oh, I just wanted to clarify. I think I heard that the staff is still looking at, as you reminded us, Rudy, still is looking at ways to allow people to call in as well as to come.
Yeah, we're looking at that. I think where I'm going is, we would have to amend our policies. So we're just trying to figure out how to, what the right path forward is. Commissioner Shea.
Yeah, as I think one of the few entities in the region that has adopted a very ambitious telecommuting goal, led by Gerald Doherty, we're seeking to get 75% of our eligible employees, meaning those who don't have to physically be at work, telecommute to work on a permanent basis. What options are we making for people to be able to telecommute to participate as board members of this body?
The June meeting won't have that option. It will be all in person for the policy board. And
why have we not allowed for that option? There's a lot of people that drive very, very long distances to get here and they've had issues previous to this, but why have we ruled out that option?
I'm not ruling it out, Commissioner. I asked initially for patience. We've got to figure all these things out. It takes a lot of technology and other things. So the June meeting will be in person, and we've got a very small staff and a very small technical staff. So we're going to work through those things. Just ask for your patience as we do that.
So you do intend to try and allow for, just so I can be clear, you do intend to allow for the possibility for people to participate?
I think we need to my suggestion is we're going to bring that back and have a discussion about that at the board.
Can we have that on the June board meeting?
We'll look at it. I got to see what else we've got on the agenda. If the agenda is not too packed, we can do that. Otherwise, it'll be at the next meeting. But we will, because that's a board, I think that's a decision we need to bring forward to the board. Is there,
discuss it and vote on
it? So everybody's got that. We're meeting in June. We'll make sure that everybody gets lots of reminders that we're changing locations as well. It's on June the 14th, I believe. Yes, June the 14th at 2 p.m. And then we've got a TAC meeting on May the 17th at 2. Other than that, I have no other announcements. And so we will adjourn at 3:56 p.m. You all have a good afternoon. Thank you for your time.
Sorry, I was late.
Perfect timing.
Came right in time to say hi.